live. Welcome everyone to our office hours, where you can ask questions related to anything MDT, ConfigMgr, Intune, OS deployment, most Windows related stuff. My name is Johan Arvedmark. I'll be your host for the next hour, and as usual, I absolutely love questions. So, speaking of this, you do have the chance here to ask questions either in the Zoom meeting where uh, I'm broadcasting this from, but we can also do it through the different streams that we have live up on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. I'm monitoring chat window here on my left monitor where I will see those incoming messages. I won't see it from the Twitter platform as of yet, but at least we'll be able to capture questions from pretty much everywhere right now. So once again, welcome. And I'm going to switch over to this view here a little bit, and we are ready to go. So, Davey had a question. It was first out this afternoon. Let's see. Using an upgrade OS from upgrade package sequence, basically using a sequence to upgrade Windows 10 to a new one. However, at first log on, it runs through an out-of-box experience wizard for location, find my device, link diagnostic data, and advertisement ID. Any idea on how I can stop doing that? I haven't seen that in a long time, and I haven't seen it for in-place upgrades. I have seen it for bare metal deployments when the unattended XML template that ConfigMgr was using um, was missing a few sections for the out-of-box experience. Um, Nothing that rings a bell at all. And I usually know stuff like this, but I don't recognize that one, I'm afraid. To troubleshoot that one, I would probably have to ask you to simply uh, drop me an email. I'll give you the address here in the chat. Um, and um, get me TS and STS log file from the sequence itself so I can see what it started with, but primarily the setup act log file from the setup itself. That might give you some clue on why it's showing that particular screen during in-place upgrade. Normally, these sequences that we use to run in-place upgrades through, like this one here, when you have an upgrade, this was assessment, it was not the actual upgrade. Let's see this one then. This step here that runs the upgrade, there are no additional settings for it. So it doesn't use an unattended file, etc. For this purpose, it launches it through command line parameters when it's run. So drop me an email with those log files, and I'll be happy to take a look, but it's nothing that rings a bell right away regarding why you would see that end screen. And as I mentioned, I have seen it for bare metal deployment, but then it was related to an unattended file, which I don't think we will have in this case. So sorry about that, but can't know everything, even though I have stumbled across a lot of things over my days. Oh, that was a follow-up comment. If you run a setup type install, it does the same thing. Does it do the same thing if you do a regular apply vim on the machine with the unattended file from ConfigMgr? If that does it, it's something else going on. But again, the log file would help. The setup log file might give a clue to why that is happening, for sure. Let's see. There was a question regarding, let's see. Basically, an organization wanted to take their ConfigMan environment and host it in Azure rather than having it on premises. Uh, the current environment has about 100 remote DPs, and thinking about reassigning some of these DPs to the new primary site. Uh, in terms of relocating DPs, I actually prefer to spin up new ones rather than reallocating them. So basically, if I have an old site over here with 100 DPs and I'll spin up a new environment over here where I probably want to even try to reduce the number of DPs a little bit, especially if they're going to be up in Azure. I'm assuming some of them are still going to stay on premises, but I would actually spin up new VMs and connect them to the new site and just phase out my old ones for now. It will take, of course, a little time to replicate the new content down to the new DPs, but still, I prefer to set up new DPs versus trying to relocate existing ones, or even try to do like in-place upgrades of the OS to get them up to a newer version. I much rather just do a new setup and leave them like that. A bit of a warning though, running Config Manager in Azure works well. There are even organizations running it in Amazon. It's just be worry about the price tag. It can be quite expensive to run VMs that are that powerful in the environment. So you can't really shut them down either. They have to be running at all times. So it does add a bit of a cost to it. As long as you're ready for that or prepared for that, that's all fine. I mean, it's costly to have a local data center as well, but just be aware of that config manager and all the site servers around it is one of these platforms that are fairly expensive to run up in Azure. All right. Was another question related to PowerShell deployment in MDT. Any help will be appreciated. So to give you some context there, there is a free extension to MDT called PSD. It's a PowerShell deployment extension, and what that one does, um, it simply takes your existing deployment share and removes all VB scripts and replaces it with PowerShell script to give some additional functionality, not just having a modern script language, PowerShell, but also to give you deployment over HTTPS and peer-to-peer capabilities, which is quite critical to get performance out of large-scale deployments and also to keep the cost down when doing cloud imaging. Because when you have VMs up in Azure, for example, for OS deployment, or if using a similar in Amazon, you pay for download. So every image that you deploy, it's like 50 cents, give or take. It's half a dollar for a deployment. And if you have an office type location like this one here, uh, it's definitely beneficial if only one of the machine is downloading stuff, wherever that machine happened to be, and then it can share content to other. And this is the stuff that we added in PSD. In terms of getting that environment up and going, we did provide some basic step-by-step guidance here on our Friends of MDT repository. So if you go to the documentation, it will take you through the main service setup and then also how you add in IIS, etc. If you have more specific questions on that, I'm going to need a little bit more details than just not being successful if you get an error during the install or basically where the issue is. I can tell you the most common error we see is that if you set this up for HTTPS, you obviously need PKI. It can be a self-signed cert for a lab, but it can also be a full-blown PKI. That certificate must be added into the boot image. So the way we have done that particular implementation is that you simply export that cert and you put that in the PSD resources certificate folder. Because if you do that, when we update this PSD extended deployment share, it gets automatically added into the boot image as part of that process. Because if you don't do this, you only will the setup will simply stop in the middle and say, "I'm so sorry, I could not connect to the virtual directory." So IIS must be operational. You need to have WebDAV installed. You need to have the binding set correctly for if you're using a certificate, and that cert again must be added into the boot image. But if you can give a little more detail about what issue you're seeing, um, I'll be happy to answer that. Let's see. Follow-up question. Yeah, you can absolutely. Please resend me that link to the boot image, and I can take a look. I have a feeling that ended up a bit farther down in my email at the moment. Let's see if I can find that real quick. Bum, 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 bum. Just requested a code to get to that link. See if that works. Nothing yet so far. All right, I think I may have to follow up on that one. Here we go, I got the code now. All right, I will download those files and take a look and see if I can see something obvious in that ISO file. I don't want to bring it up on the screen in case it actually contains some user credentials, etc. that not want to be seen public in a live stream. So let me check on that right after we're done here, and I can see if I see anything obvious in that boot image. Otherwise, we do have files that I can send over that provides a little bit more debugging information. That's the beautiful thing about open source code, is that you can modify it to your heart's content. That's the whole point of it. So I will do that right after we're done here. All right, thank you so much. There was a question coming in on YouTube. Regarding Windows Hello for Business on hybrid devices. They are not co-managed, they are not enrolled to Intune. Have you an idea on the best way to deal with that? I actually do not, but I do know someone who does. And he is often quite helpful in the community. So get the link here. This gentleman over here, Ben Whitmore, he's one of our instructors here at the Academy. He runs the Securing Mobile Devices course. He has written a ton of guides and blog posts related to Windows Hello, and this will be a good starting point, I think, to reach out and ask for that particular configuration. But I haven't done it, so that would be my best bet on that one. Right. There's another question coming up on Intune. What would you recommend to get starting with Intune? Well, I'm a bit biased on that particular question, and primarily I think because we do run sort of an introductional type Intune course on the academy that we run for 6 weeks. So that is obviously what I consider to be a good starting point. It would be this one here. Obviously, this one is not free, but it's 6 weeks of training on Intune for Windows desktop devices. If you're looking for books, because there was a comment there on regarding books as well. Scott, where are you? Let me see. So this gentleman here has a remarkably good book. See if I can find a link to it. Here we go. I'll put that link in the chat for you. But this one, I got it just before Christmas. This is a fantastic book if you are interested in getting learning more about Intune in general and also about its integration with ConfigMgr to some extent, settings catalog, and all that good stuff. So that one is good. Then there was another book from, let's see, it was Per Larsen. Let's see what that one was about. To double check that, give me just a second. Yeah, that's the one. So first of all, Per Larsen over here. Be Microsoft MVP. Now he joined Microsoft recently or a little while back. And the book he helped author is this one here. So good books, both of them, to give you a great introduction to everything that is MEM these days. So I'll be happy, of course, if you join the course, but if you want to try to get away with slightly lower dollar bill, these books are good. I've read the Scott Duffy one. This one is still on my reading list. I have it in my office though. So I'll put the link in the chat for you guys, for those of you that attend the Zoom meeting. The one, this one here. I'll put down the link as well. All right. If I can reply here, I could not. All right. So good stuff there. Learning resources for Intune. That's another question coming in on LinkedIn. Thanks for hosting this QA. This is great. Thank you. Do you have any way to trigger your notifications for Windows Update applications countdown showing instead of the 720-second max limit. I do not for the reboot notification. You can do, obviously, is splitting up the sequences in two parts to make it go faster. Because usually it's the actual download part that takes the longest. If you have actual upgrades that are running for very long time, it's usually depending, it's something that is wrong. But in terms of the actual reboot, I'm assuming the reference is to this one here. Like if you have a restart and this value here, which is 720 seconds, I have seen one solution for it. May not be the most elegant one, but we simply skipped the restart in the end and had a scheduled task being created that rebooted the computer after a while. Not sure what the sequence will think about that if you do it in the middle. And there is no really way to pause it either. And that's the best I can come up with at the moment. If you have to use a sequence to do that reboot and delay it for whatever reason. So I mentioned earlier, what I prefer to do is to split them up in a validation sequence that pre-caching of content and validates that the system is there. And then I have a pure upgrade sequence that just runs the upgrade itself and then reboots and making it as quick as possible. I have seen some solutions from the community where you take advantage of lactose notification from Martin Bengtsson. This gentleman here. Let's see if I can find his. This script has been around for a good while now, and Martin has been really, really good in updating it as time goes by. And this one is used to drive reboot processes and allow folks to like snooze and suspend and continue and basically do restart now when needed. So integrating it with this may be a solution for you. So I'll put that in the chat for you. Else, OneWin had different ways to drive upgrades, intended primarily for VPN clients. It's called the IPU installer. First name Johan, also not me, a different one. But this is an application that drives the upgrade, and this one has its own little scheduler that, and you can deal with reboots and whatnot. So maybe that could be helpful. I'll put the link in the chat there so you have it. That's what I can come up with on the top of my head regarding that one. All right. Do you know how to empty recycle bin from ConfigMgr? Can't say I have tried that one. If it's for a specific user. You might have to run it as the user. Maybe a configuration item baseline that allow you to do things as the logged in user, something like that. See if I find something quickly. I've seen some basic, I find some basic like delete folder stuff, but I'm not sure if those are very well tested in recent version of Windows. It's not something I stumbled across needing to do, and I would put in a word of caution around that, because believe it or not, some users store stuff in their recycle bin even if they're not supposed to. It happened more than once that they use that as an archive of things. So unfortunately, I don't have any good ideas on that one from the top of my head. All right, let's see if there were some follow-up info on the LinkedIn stream. If I can find that one. Oh, I don't see that one, but it appeared that someone posted you guys helping each other out. That's fantastic. So they should be available as soon as the stream goes live for everyone else. Could be that because I'm streaming, I don't see those comments right now. If anyone shared a link, please share it again, and I'll be happy to share it here in the chat as well. All right. Let's see. Follow-up questions on ConfigMgr build in Azure. Eliminate the need for remote DPs. Yeah, that's something I recommend in general. And it all goes down to, instead of having to deal with hundreds of DPs in an organization, you can get away, remove a lot of them by simply embracing peer-to-peer a little bit. Do this right, and you can typically reduce like 90% of the internet and WAN link traffic, and you can get rid of tons of distribution points in your organizations. There are organizations out there with hundreds of thousands of clients that are using a handful of DPs today. So that's definitely an option. Peer-to-peer takes a while to get used to be perfectly open, but it's been around for a while. The technologies are mature. Branch cache is built into Windows. Peer cache is ConfigMgr only, and optimization is also built into Windows. And you can use that not just to reduce the number of DPs, but in general to speed up things, making sure that updates are applied in a timely fashion and your machine are patched fully everywhere they are, and just better use of the hardware that you already have. Because if you have machines that are basically well connected to each other, why not allow them to share content in a secure manner in between them? And that other clients that are well connected to each other, they share content in between them. And then you can reduce the number of DPs, and you can also, of course, reduce the number of connections to that DP from these clients, or the number of downloads from that DP. So getting a better resource usage. Um, Friendly tip, on the Academy, we every now and then run mini courses, and they differ in the way that they are free for the community. And we had one we just ran before Christmas on maximizing Windows 10 and Windows 11 network performance. This one takes you through pretty much everything regarding peer-to-peer. So DO, branch cache, peer cache, and some other technologies related to this. So if you're interested in learning more on how to use peer-to-peer natively with ConfigMgr and Windows, this is a good session. The recording is available, and the price for this one is just right because it's $0, which is in general is a good price. All right. Let's see. Follow-up recommendation, if you want to start to play around with peer-to-peer, learn it in the lab first. I have over the years received calls that were no fun. Organizations trying to implement peer-to-peer and doing it a little bit differently, like configuring it in such a way so that clients in different sites are allowed to peer-to-peer to each other. That's a quite effective way to fully stop everything from happening on the network, and usually the network team is not too overly excited about that little stint. So the trick is learn about these technologies, learn how they work, learn about what their limitations are. So spin up a lab environment where you can do this. I often refer to one of the setups that I have here in this lab where I'm using pfSense routers to simulate multiple networks. And these networks I have configured with throttling, with latency, with package loss, to basically mimic a larger environment, but allowing me to play around and test without risking to destroying anything. Because if I do something bad here, well, it's only affect my lab. If I go production and do something bad with the networking, well, I'm affecting quite a lot of people. So yeah, that was that. So there was a question regarding software updates, edit membership. I'm assuming it's a software update group that is referred to in the question. So if I'm using ConfigMgr to do software updates, most organizations, they have one or more ADR rules that they run every now and then, and they create software update groups that contains the updates that they want. And not sure what the question is related to there. Edit membership. I mean, you can obviously show members and work with them to put them in different software update groups manually. Um, I prefer to have that as automated as I can, but this is an obvious option, especially for lab and test when you want to play around with maybe deploying, create a new software update group and add a few updates to that one this way, and then you can do a test deployment of that one. But usually I prefer to work with basically keeping the software update groups that are being created. I just deploy them to many different collections and do that in different times. So for example, I would start with the ADR that I have that create the group. I will automatically go ahead and deploy that to a pilot collection or one of my pilot collections. And once those have been verified, I would take the exact same group and I would just deploy it to more collections. like possibly my production type collections. So it's I don't see it being used too much, but you certainly have the ability to assign different updates to different groups manually if you don't prefer to do it through uh, automated rules. Um, some good resources in this, together with some cleanup tips you can find here. WSUS, best defense is a good offense, and Mr. Brian Dam. He works for Recast Software now, but he used to be a consultant. He has a dang good community solution to do automatic maintenance in ConfigMgr. So if you haven't seen this one, I'll put that in the chat for you. It has sort of the right mindset, I think, where we leverage automation in any way we can, rather than poking around and doing manual edits and deleting updates or declining updates manually. Yeah, so I hope I answered that question. Any tips for getting software updates to install on unknown devices during OSD? Oh, good Lord, don't get me started on that one. It's been on my old. So let me, here's the deal. If you have a sequence that you deploy and your image is not updated for whatever reason, there is certainly, see if I have it in this one. I did not, maybe one of my older. Kind of give you an idea on how much I not like it. So this action is available in ConfigMgr. And if you have a sequence deployed to all unknown computers, you can certainly deploy software updates to that collection and make them available, and then configure this to install them at deployment time. However, this particular action has been, it was not the best setup, put it that way, or best engineering behind this. This one has been broken for a decade now, and I still don't like it. It's been better for sure, but this one takes a long time to run, and it's pretty prone to do errors. There was even a user voice item for years, and the title of that action was make this action work. And it took them a while to put them on this sort of engineering table again. But I don't like this one. I don't use it. I prefer to use updated image instead. So the image that you deploy, simply replace them every month on the server and push them out. It is a much better solution. Not only is it faster, it's also more solid. So every month, either go to Microsoft and download the ISO, export the index that you're interested in, and upload that to your site server. You can also use tools like OS the Builder, Wimwich, to always constantly keep images up to date in your ConfigMgr environment. This is, in my opinion, a much better option. They are easy to work with, they've been tested well. So, yeah, I would not go that route if I can avoid it. So, Dennis have a question regarding ADRs for definition updates. Well, most organizations these days, they have stopped downloading definition updates into packages and basically allowing the clients to get them from internet instead. Because these packages in ConfigMgr tend to be modified all the time. They get fairly big if you clean them up eventually. And it's often faster to have the machine just get those smaller definition files directly from the source rather than having ConfigMgr download them first, put in the package, and then the clients are supposed to download them after they're being replicated to the entire infrastructure. So my recommendation for the significant updates is to change the order, change your deployment so you actually don't download those, but just make them available to the clients and say, hey, go get this update, but don't get it from a DP, get it from Microsoft Update in this case. All right. Can't say I have seen any good blog posts on the topic, but they might be around there. If anyone happen to have known one or seen one, feel free to post it in the chat, and I'll be happy to share it. But it's just it seemed to be like a trend. Organizations are going more towards not storing definition updates inside of packages and rather allowing the clients to get them there. So let's see. Question coming in on LinkedIn. How can we control anti-malware defender service? Basically, they had running into an issue where the engine consuming 100% of hard drive during working hours and can't disable the service. I mean, the control itself, ConfigMgr will happily help you with, or Intune will happily help you with, configure when and how these policies are in place. If it already started, not really sure what to do about that. I think that rings a bell, I'm afraid, at the moment. Rajiv asked the question. Please drop me a message on LinkedIn there since you are on LinkedIn, and I'll see if I can dig up something, but it's not something I have stumbled across on my own. Beautiful thing about having a unique last name, easy to find. Very few people with that last name in the world, and so far it's only two of us doing ConfigMgr and Intune and OSD work, so easy to find. All right, we have a whopping 15 more minutes to go. Any other questions? One. It was totally not on purpose. All right, I don't see. Oh, there we go. Was a question regarding Bitlocker and ConfigMgr lately. So let me see. The question is regarding Bitlocker Management, and as most of you probably know, Microsoft, that the ConfigMgr team basically took over the MBAM solution that Microsoft had and integrated that one in ConfigMgr. So if you have a fairly recent ConfigMgr, you can simply go into features and you can go in and enable Bitlocker Management. And then you can control the same thing as you did in ABAM from within ConfigMgr. You can assign your policies and you can create your settings for fixed disk and OS disks and external disks, etc. If a machine is already BitLockered with a certain encryption key, and you apply a different one in ConfigMgr, it's not going to change that one for you. That will basically have to be either wipe the machine again or even worse, decrypt and re-encrypt again to change the encryption level of a box. The trick usually is if you migrate from an existing AMBAM over to ConfigMgr, is to make sure that the old policies from the old AMBAM server is removed, and that's usually group policies from those machines before adding them into the ConfigMgr policies. Otherwise, the policies are quite similar to what you had in AMBAM when you create these guys. You just named differently, but the information is pretty much the same that you define for the different ones. So not too hard to configure. The best guides out there is definitely Maurice and Niall. So Maurice Daly has a 3-part guide that I often refer to. Here's the first one. Takes us through the process step by step. I'll put that in the chat for you guys. And then we have the overachiever himself, Niall Brady. He's running Windows New, but has been done for years. He has written, I don't know how he finds the time to do it, but he has written many guides over the years. And he has an extensive guide on Bitlocker Management using ConfigMgr. Some things have changed since this. For example, starting with 2103 of ConfigMgr, you can actually use enhanced HTTP. You no longer are forced to use PKI, which is very nice because it can be interesting. But I will put this link in the chat, and good resource. Something to do for a rainy day or over the weekend. All right. A follow-up comment on a lab that we talked about by using NVMe disks when our motherboard only supports PCI Express 2. I mean, if your motherboard doesn't have any M2 slots and the PCI Express speeds are slow, I mean, I've been using even quite older machines. See if I can find one of my Amazon orders here. That's a PCI. So let me show you what I mean here. So if a machine doesn't have M2 cards, you can try to find an adapter that works even for PCI 2. Sometimes they are actually backwards compatible, but you still will get some pretty good speed out of it, even if it's only PCI 2. So maybe if you can find an adapter that works with the PCI 2 slot and see how that works, or you can even try to use a version 3 adapter on a PCI 2 slot. I wouldn't bet my money that that would work though. Other way around possible, putting in a version 2 card in a version 3 slot. Might be able to find some older adapters for it. I couldn't find anything there. A quick Google search, find some older stuff. Oh, maybe this one. This is an adapter, an M2 adapter for PCI Express 2. Worth a try. It's not terribly expensive, 15 bucks. So yeah. Another option is to buy a more modern computer, obviously, but this could be worth a shot for sure. Even though it's PCI 2, it's still going to be SATA SSD by far. So I've also had a follow-up comment on Bitlocker Management. Basically, the machines does not end up with the policy that has been set in Bitlocker Management. Well, then it's quite likely something else that sets that policy. Are these newly deployed machines that shows up with the wrong encryption level? Random machines with BitLocker off beforehand. The only thing I can think of is if there is something in the sequence that sets that encryption policy so it actually starts doing the encryption early rather than waiting for BitLocker Management for kicking in. That's the only thing I can think of. Because if it starts it and there is no policy, it's going to go with the default AS128, whatever that is. And then the BitLocker Management won't be able to change it. Had been a discussion on Twitter recently. Basically, the best way to deal with OS deployment and BitLocker management with escrowing keys and whatnot. You can always enforce. I mean, back in before BitLocker management, what we often had to do in sequences was to basically force in certain. I have it in this one, I think. Force in certain encryptions earlier in the process. And then we would enable whatever we needed to enable. So maybe look if there is something like this kicking in or a script that does this that kicks in that puts on a different encryption level than what you have in BitLocker management. Or simply try to disable it from the sequence for now and see if it kicks in later after deployment with the right encryption key. That's the only thing I could come up with on the top of my head. There are also registry keys you can look what policies that actually have been applied to the machine. And the mbam in ConfigMgr is using the same registry keys as the old mbam did, so you can often refer back to some of those troubleshooting guides and get some help there. Question from Ion, how would you go ahead and solving wrong time zone for an autopilot machine? I have only seen one post about that over the years from 2020 something. Let's see if I can find that one. Yeah, it was this one here. This is the only one I have seen uh, for doing this as part of your provisioning. Maybe that. I'll put that in the chat so you guys have the link. Not sure how advisable it is to change time zones on the fly, but I've certainly seen or heard about scenarios where this might be needed. Oh, yeah. Other questions? More minutes? A question on LinkedIn. What's your take on third-party updates? I absolutely love third-party updates if it's done right. And the way to do it right is to go see these people. In my opinion, this is the best there is. Doesn't matter if it's ConfigMgr or Intune or a combination of the two of them. This is done right, outstanding stuff. If they ever get public and offer stock options public, I'll be in line to buy those, put it that way. This is working so well. And the price for this, dirt cheap in comparison to what you get. So there was a question on LinkedIn regarding the chat. So on the Academy site for all these office hours, there is an invitation once you are in the course to a Zoom meeting where a lot of us are answering or submitting questions, and we have a chat going on as well. But I do monitor, as you probably realize, on YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook also. Just a little bit harder to keep track of them, but I'm doing my best in a separate window here to see those. So it's just we have different options of asking questions. Either you do it in the Zoom meeting that you get from the Academy site, or you ask when the stream shows up here. All right. Uh, all right then. The hour is up. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. As usual, pleasure, great questions, and I hope to see you guys next Wednesday. Thank you so much.